Marcus Webb had 3 simple rules for working as the only human medic aboard an interspecies research vessel. Rule 1. Alien biology manuals were written by people who had clearly never seen the inside of a living creature. Rule 2. Never trust medical equipment that came with a warranty shorter than your expected lifespan. Rule 3. When the emergency klaxon sounds like a dying space whale, someone was probably having a very bad day. Today that someone was Zethkar, and Marcus was pretty sure the 7-foot-tall warrior was about to make it everyone else's problem too. What exactly did he do? Marcus asked, pulling on his gloves while stepping over what looked like pieces of the ship's artificial gravity generator scattered across the medical bay floor. Dr. Vexilla, a Nexarian with 6 arms that she somehow managed to make all flutter nervously at once, consulted her datapad with the intensity of someone reading her own obituary. The official report states that crew member Zethkar experienced a minor disagreement with the gravitational field maintenance unit. A minor disagreement. Correct. Marcus looked at the mangled metal debris, then at Zethkar, who was unconscious on the medical table with what appeared to be scorch marks in a pattern that suggested he had tried to headbutt a lightning bolt. Vex, when you say minor disagreement, are we talking like a polite difference of opinion? Or more like he tried to arm wrestle a fusion reactor? The gravitational unit appears to have won, she replied, which was probably the closest thing to humor Marcus had ever heard from her. Morse, the medical bay's AI, chimed in with the cheerful tone of someone announcing a terminal diagnosis. Patient exhibits severe electrical trauma, multiple fractures, and what I can only describe as aggressive molecular reorganization. Prognosis, statistically grim with a side of improbable. Thanks for the pep talk, Morse. Marcus began his examination, noting that Zethkar's vital signs were doing their best impression of a particularly violent seismograph. How long has he been like this? 17 minutes and 32 seconds, Morse replied. I should mention that his life signs have been declining at a rate that suggests his warranty is about to expire. Marcus had worked with enough alien species to know that what killed a human in minutes might take hours to kill a Kethvari warrior, and vice versa. The problem was that galactic medical equipment was designed by committee, which meant it had all the reliability of a weather forecast and twice the attitude. Vex, fire up the cardiac stimulator. Morse, I need a full metabolic breakdown of Kethvari physiology, and I need it 5 minutes ago. Marcus! Vexilla's voice carried that special tone reserved for people who were about to deliver terrible news. The cardiac stimulator is part of the equipment that Zethkar disagreed with. Marcus looked at the scattered debris again. Right. Plan B, then. He reached for his human medical kit, which looked primitive compared to the sleek alien technology, but had the distinct advantage of actually working when he needed it to. Morse, what's the Kethvari equivalent of a heartbeat? The Kethvari possess a dual-chambered cardiovascular system that operates on a bioelectric feedback loop. Think of it as nature's way of making sure warriors can keep fighting, even when they should probably sit down and have a nice cup of tea. Great. So, I need to jumpstart a biological car battery. Marcus began setting up his equipment, muttering under his breath about the absurdity of being the only medic in the galaxy who still believed in the therapeutic value of actually touching his patients. As he worked, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Medical Bay, this is Captain Thylone. Status report, please. And before you ask, yes, the entire bridge heard the explosion, and no, we're not sure what to tell Zethkar's clan if he doesn't make it. Working on it, Captain, Marcus replied, attaching leads to Zethkar's chest. The warrior's skin felt cold, which in a species that ran naturally hot was about as encouraging as finding out your parachute was actually a decorative napkin. Marcus, Vexilla whispered. His life signs just flatlined. Morse immediately began the death announcement protocol with all the enthusiasm of a game show host. Patient status update. Zethkar, Clan Warrior 3rd Class, has achieved biological termination at 14:27 hours ship time. Cause of death, catastrophic disagreement with ship's infrastructure. Next of kin notification protocols have been initiated. He's not dead, Marcus said firmly, continuing to work. The medical scanners are quite definitive on this point, Morse replied. Death is typically characterized by the complete cessation of vital functions, which our patient has achieved with admirable thoroughness. Your scanners think a hangnail is a flesh-eating plague. Forgive me if I don't trust them to diagnose death. Marcus charged the defibrillator, which looked like something that belonged in a museum but had never let him down. Clear. The jolt of electricity made Zethkar's body convulse, but the monitors remained stubbornly flat. Marcus tried again. Still nothing. Marcus, Vexilla said gently, perhaps it's time to accept that some disagreements cannot be resolved. Not today. Marcus switched tactics, beginning chest compressions with the kind of determination usually reserved for people who had made very poor life choices and were too stubborn to admit it. Come on, you oversized gravity wrestling moron. You do not get to die on my watch because you picked a fight with a machine. But even as he worked, Marcus could hear Morse beginning the official death certification process, and somewhere in the back of his mind he wondered if maybe this time the universe had finally found a problem that human stubbornness couldn't solve. Morse had apparently decided that death was the perfect opportunity to showcase his efficiency. Death certificate generation in progress. Estimated completion time, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Please note that all personal effects will be catalogued according to Galactic Salvage Protocol 77 Delta. He's not salvage, Marcus growled, continuing chest compressions with the rhythm of someone who had done this too many times before. He's a patient. Technically, he's a former patient, Morse corrected helpfully. Current classification would be biological waste awaiting disposal procedures. I'm going to reprogram you to only speak in limericks. Captain Thyloan's voice crackled over the intercom again, and Marcus could practically hear the anxiety sweat forming on his blue-scaled forehead. Medical Bay, please tell me you have good news. I've got 3 different diplomatic channels asking about our crew manifest, and the Kethvari High Command just sent a message asking about their warrior's status. Still working, Captain, Marcus replied, switching back to the defibrillator. The machine whined as it charged, a sound that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Marcus, Vexilla said softly, the High Command doesn't take kindly to losing their warriors. If Zethkar doesn't make it, they might consider it an act of negligence, or worse, an act of war. Then they clearly do not understand the difference between negligence and a crew member who thinks the appropriate response to a maintenance problem is percussive troubleshooting. Marcus placed the paddles on Zethkar's chest again. Clear. Another jolt. Another flat line. The medical bay doors slid open, and Lieutenant Commander Jorik stumbled in, his usually pristine uniform looking like he'd been wrestling with a particularly vindictive filing cabinet. Is it true? Is Zethkar really dead? According to every piece of medical equipment in this room, yes, Marcus said. According to me, he's just taking an extended coffee break. Marcus, I admire your optimism, Jorik said, but even human medicine has limits. Human medicine, Marcus replied, attaching a different set of leads to Zethkar's temples, was developed by a species that spent thousands of years figuring out increasingly creative ways to not die. We've gotten pretty good at it. Morse chimed in again. Death certificate completion, 3 minutes, 12 seconds remaining. I've taken the liberty of contacting the ship's recycling division regarding biological matter disposal. Morse, if you don't stop talking about disposal, I'm going to introduce you to some percussive maintenance of my own. Dr. Vexilla was checking her instruments with the methodical precision of someone who really didn't want to be wrong. Marcus, I've run 3 different scans. Neural activity is 0. Cardiovascular function is 0. Respiratory function is 0. By every medical standard in the known galaxy, this patient is deceased. By every medical standard in the known galaxy, humans should have gone extinct the first time someone invented fire. Marcus shot back. We're notoriously bad at following medical standards. He switched to a different approach, one that probably wasn't in any alien medical textbook. Human CPR was designed for human physiology, but Marcus had spent enough time studying Kethvari biology to know where their cardiovascular system differed. The key was the secondary heart, a backup system that most medical scanners treated as redundant tissue. What are you doing now? Vexilla asked, watching as Marcus changed the position of his compressions. Improvising. The Cathavari have a secondary cardiovascular pump that your scanners probably think is a really aggressive spleen. If I can get that working, it might jumpstart the primary system. That's not how Cathavari physiology works, she protested. Good thing I didn't ask how it works. I'm asking how it might work if we're really, really lucky and the universe has a sense of humor. The ship's intercom buzzed again. Medical Bay, this is Navigator Prexlin. Long-range sensors are picking up something concerning. We might have company soon. What kind of company? Marcus asked, not stopping his compressions. The kind that shoots first and asks questions later. Kethmori radar signatures moving fast and heading directly for us. Marcus paused for exactly 1 second to let that information sink in. Well, that's just perfect. Morse, how long until they reach us? Based on current trajectory and velocity, the hostile vessels will arrive in approximately 18 minutes. Shall I add imminent space piracy to today's incident report? Sure, throw it on the pile. Marcus resumed his work with renewed determination. Captain, any chance we can outrun them? Thylone's voice came back strained. Not with our current engine problems, we're looking at a potential boarding situation. Wonderful, Marcus muttered. Dead crew member, incoming pirates, and medical equipment that thinks a stubbed toe is a mortal wound. This is shaping up to be a Tuesday. Dr. Vexilla was reviewing her scans again, shaking her head with all 6 arms. Marcus, I understand your dedication, but perhaps we should focus on preparing for the incoming threat. Zethkar has been clinically dead for nearly 10 minutes. Even if we could revive him, the neural damage would be extensive. Vex, has anyone ever told you that your bedside manner could use some work? Frequently. It's why I specialize in research rather than patient care. Morse announced cheerfully. Death certificate completion, 90 seconds remaining. I've also prepared a lovely obituary highlighting the deceased's impressive ability to find fault with inanimate objects. Marcus ignored the AI and focused on the rhythm of his compressions, the steady charge and shock of the defibrillator, and the stubborn belief that death was really more of a strong suggestion than a universal law. Somewhere in the back of his mind he could hear the approaching whine of hostile engines, but right now, the only battle that mattered was the one happening on his medical table. Come on, Zethkar, he whispered. You are too pig-headed to let a little thing like death stop you from complaining about the ship's maintenance schedule. The first explosion rattled the ship hard enough to make Marcus's equipment dance across the medical table like caffeinated surgical instruments. Through the medical bay's observation window, he could see the distinctive green energy signatures of Kethmori weapons painting abstract art across the ship's hull. Well, Marcus said conversationally to Zethkar's still form, your timing has always been terrible, but this might be a new record. Morse's cheerful voice cut through the sounds of distant combat. Death certificate completed. Also, incoming transmission from the attacking vessels. They're requesting immediate surrender and threatening to use our crew members as decorative lawn furniture. Patch me through to the bridge, Marcus said, not pausing in his chest compressions. Captain, please tell me you have a brilliant plan that doesn't involve us becoming furniture. Captain Thylone's voice came back tinged with the special kind of panic reserved for people who had just realized their day was about to get significantly worse. Working on it, Marcus. How's our patient? Still dead, but I'm taking that as more of a temporary setback than a permanent condition. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered, and Marcus could hear the unmistakable sound of hull breaches being sealed by emergency systems. In the distance, the sound of energy weapons meant the crew was putting up some kind of resistance, though given that their idea of a security team was basically Zethkar, and whoever happened to be carrying something that could double as a weapon, Marcus wasn't optimistic about their chances. Dr. Vexilla was strapping down everything that wasn't already secured. Marcus, shouldn't we be evacuating to the emergency shelters? You go ahead. I'll catch up after I finish not letting this guy be dead. That's not how death works. Says the person whose species considers a mild fever to be a planetary emergency. The ship shuddered again, and this time Marcus could hear the distinctive hiss of atmosphere escaping somewhere nearby. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow that made the medical bay look like the set of a particularly grim horror movie. All crew members to defensive positions, came Thyloan's voice over the intercom. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill, though I really wish it were because drills are significantly less likely to result in everyone being turned into decorative items. Lieutenant Commander Jorik's voice joined the chorus of panic from the corridor outside. Medical bay, we've got boarding pods attaching to the hull. They'll be through the airlocks in minutes. Boarding pods, Marcus repeated. Because of course they have boarding pods. Morse, any useful information about our new visitors? The Keth Mori are a warrior culture known for their prowess in combat, their collection of trophies from defeated enemies, and their deeply held belief that interior decorating should involve the spinal columns of their foes. Customer satisfaction rating, 0 stars, would not recommend. That's encouraging. Marcus switched back to the defibrillator, checking the charge. Vex, last chance to evacuate. This is about to get interesting. Dr. Vexilla looked at the door, then at Marcus, then at Zethkar's motionless form. I'm staying. Someone needs to document this for medical journals. Either your successful revival of a clinically dead patient, or your spectacular failure in the face of space pirates. I appreciate the vote of confidence. The sounds from the corridor were getting closer now. The distinctive thump of magnetic boots, the electronic whine of charging weapons, and what sounded like someone trying to cut through a blast door with equipment that wasn't quite up to the task. Marcus could hear crew members shouting orders, though it was hard to tell if they were tactical instructions or just general expressions of panic. Medical bay, this is Navigator Prexilin. The pirates have breached sections 7 through 12. They're moving systematically through the ship, and their leader is heading directly for your location. Their leader? Scarfang. He's got a reputation for collecting spines from defeated enemies and using them as wind chimes. Wind chimes, Marcus repeated flatly. Well, that's not ominous at all. Morse chimed in helpfully. Scarfang is a Keth Mori battle leader with an estimated kill count of over 300 sentient beings. His hobbies include trophy collection, intimidating surrender negotiations, and what appears to be amateur spinal architecture. Morse, your timing is impeccable as always. The sound of cutting tools was getting closer, accompanied by what Marcus was pretty sure were war cries in a language that sounded like someone gargling gravel. Through the medical bay's doors, he could see the flickering light of plasma cutters working through the ship's internal barriers. Marcus, Dr. Vexilla said quietly, perhaps we should consider that some battles cannot be won. Vex, I've been having that exact thought for the last 15 minutes. Marcus placed the defibrillator paddles on Zethkar's chest one more time. But here's the thing about humans. We're really, really bad at knowing when to quit. The cutting sound stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear heavy footsteps approaching the medical bay doors, accompanied by what sounded like the clicking of claws on metal decking. The emergency lighting cast everything in shadows that seemed to move independently, and somewhere in the ship's ventilation system, something was making a sound like wind blowing through a collection of hollow bones. Clear, Marcus said, and triggered the defibrillator. The jolt of electricity made Zethkar's body arch off the table, but the monitors remained stubbornly flat. Marcus was preparing for another attempt when the medical bay doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the corridor's emergency lighting, was something that looked like what would happen if someone crossed a nightmare with a very bad attitude and gave it access to military-grade weapons. Scarfang was every bit as intimidating as his reputation suggested, with ceremonial scars covering his armor, and what appeared to be actual spinal columns decorating his shoulder guards like the universe's most macabre fashion statement. Well, Marcus said conversationally, this is about to get complicated. Scarfang stepped into the medical bay with the casual confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved by the application of overwhelming violence. His eyes immediately fixed on Zethkar's motionless form, and Marcus could practically see the calculations running behind those predatory pupils. Fresh corpse, warm body, potential spine for the collection. Human. Scarfang's voice sounded like two pieces of sandpaper having an argument. You will step away from the dead warrior. See, here's the thing, Marcus said, not moving from his position beside the medical table. He's not actually dead. He's more like temporarily inconvenienced. Dr. Vexilla made a small sound that might have been a whimper, or possibly the beginning of a prayer to whatever deity protected people who found themselves in spectacularly bad situations. Morse, with his usual talent for reading the room, chose that moment to announce, "Patient status remains, biologically terminated, time of death, 14:27 hours, ship time." Scarfang's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Your own medical system confirms it. The warrior is dead, and his spine will make a fine addition to my collection." "Morse has the diagnostic accuracy of a broken compass," Marcus replied. "Watch this." He charged the defibrillator again, placed the paddles on Zethkar's chest, and triggered another jolt. The warrior's body convulsed. The monitors flickered briefly and then went flat again. But this time, something different happened. Zethkar's eyes snapped open. The warrior sat up abruptly, looking around the medical bay with the confused expression of someone who had just woken up from a very strange dream. "What happened? Why does everything taste like burnt metal?" Marcus felt his heart skip approximately 3 beats but managed to keep his voice level. "Oh, good. You picked the perfect time to stop being dead." "Dead?" Zethkar looked at the medical monitors, which were still showing flat lines, then at Morse's display, which was flashing "patient deceased" in helpful red letters. "That can't be right. I feel fine. Well, mostly fine. Slightly crispy around the edges, but fine." Scarfang had gone completely still, which in a Keth Mori warrior was roughly equivalent to a human dropping their jaw and staring. "Impossible. The scanners show no life signs." "Yeah, they do that," Marcus said with the tone of someone discussing a particularly stubborn vending machine. "Alien medical equipment has some trouble with human intervention techniques. Death is more of a guideline than a rule when humans are involved." Zethkar swung his legs off the medical table and stood up, apparently unaware that he was supposed to be impossible. "I remember fighting with the gravity generator, then everything went dark." "How long was I unconscious?" "About 15 minutes, Marcus replied. "Give or take a clinical death." "Clinical death?" Zethkar looked at the monitors again. "But I'm standing here talking to you." "Details," Marcus said dismissively. "The important thing is that you're feeling better." Dr. Vexilla was staring at her patient with the expression of someone watching the fundamental laws of biology pack up and leave for somewhere more reasonable. "This is impossible. Every medical protocol says that after 15 minutes of zero brain activity, revival is impossible without extensive neural damage." "Vex, your protocols were written by people who never had to deal with human medical techniques," Marcus said. "We've been getting people undead for centuries. It's kind of our thing." Scarfang was backing away slowly, his weapon lowered but not holstered. Marcus could see genuine uncertainty in the pirate's eyes, which was probably the first time in years that Scarfang had encountered something he didn't understand. "The human speaks truth?" the Keth Mori leader asked, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect or possibly supernatural dread. "Well," Marcus said, realizing he might have stumbled onto something useful, "it's not exactly routine, but humans have a certain reputation for refusing to accept death as a permanent condition. We're very stubborn about these things." Morse, apparently unable to process the contradiction between his sensors and the walking, talking contradiction standing in front of them, kept repeating, "Patient status error. Patient status error. Unable to reconcile deceased classification with current ambulatory behavior." Zethkar stretched, apparently working out some post-resurrection kinks. "I feel like I was struck by lightning and then run over by a cargo transport. But other than that, surprisingly good for being dead." "You're taking this very well," Marcus observed. "Kethvari warriors are taught that death in battle is an honor," Zethkar replied. "Death due to losing an argument with ship maintenance, however, is just embarrassing. I'm actually relieved to find out it was temporary." Scarfang was now pressed against the far wall, his eyes fixed on Zethkar with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that might explode at any moment. "Human," he said slowly. "Your species can reverse death?" "It's more of a specialty skill," Marcus said. beginning to enjoy himself. We don't advertise it much because it tends to make other species nervous. The pirate leader's grip on his weapon was loosening, and Marcus could see the exact moment when legendary confidence began to crack in the face of something that challenged everything Scarfang thought he knew about the universe. "This changes things," Scarfang muttered, backing toward the destroyed doorway. "Does it?" Marcus asked innocently. "I mean, we're still the same friendly research crew we were 5 minutes ago, just with slightly more flexible attitudes toward mortality." Marcus realized he had stumbled into the opportunity of several lifetimes, and he wasn't about to waste it. "Morse, how many other crew members are currently showing flat vitals?" 17 crew members are currently unconscious due to combat trauma, with 12 showing significantly reduced life signs," Morse replied, apparently deciding to be helpful for once. "Reduced life signs," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. "Vex, that sounds like they might be in the early stages of death, doesn't it?" Dr. Vexilla caught on immediately, her 6 arms beginning to flutter with what Marcus was choosing to interpret as excitement rather than impending nervous breakdown. "Oh yes, absolutely. Early-stage mortality is quite common during combat situations. Left untreated, it almost always progresses to full death." "Well, we can't have that," Marcus said, gathering his medical equipment with the air of someone preparing for a busy afternoon. "Scarfang, you might want to step back. Human resurrection techniques can be quite dramatic." The Kethmori leader was now pressed so far against the wall that Marcus was worried he might actually phase through it. "You intend to raise the dead?" "Raise the dead makes it sound so mystical," Marcus replied. "I prefer to think of it as aggressive life coaching." Captain Thyloan's voice crackled over the intercom. "Medical Bay, status report. Are you all still alive in there?" "Define alive," Marcus replied. "We've got one recently deceased crew member who's feeling much better, one terrified pirate leader, and about 17 more crew members who need immediate undying services." There was a long pause. "Marcus, did you just say undying services?" "It's a human medical specialty, Captain. Apparently we forgot to mention it during the crew briefing." Another pause, longer this time. "And our pirate problem?" Marcus looked at Scarfang, who was watching Zethkar move around with the fascination of someone observing a particularly interesting natural disaster. "I think our reputation management situation is improving. Morse," Marcus continued, "please announce to all crew members that anyone showing signs of mortality should report to the nearest human medic immediately for emergency resurrection services." "I'm not sure that's medically accurate," Morse protested. "Morse, medical accuracy is less important right now than psychological warfare. Make the announcement." The AI's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Attention all crew members. Any personnel experiencing death or death-adjacent symptoms should report for immediate human resurrection protocols. Please note that human medical techniques may appear supernatural, but are actually the result of advanced biological manipulation techniques developed by a species with an unhealthy obsession with refusing to die." "Morse, that was perfect," Marcus said. "Scarfang, you're welcome to observe if you'd like. Educational purposes." The pirate leader nodded slowly, apparently unable to form words. Marcus left the medical bay with Dr. Vexilla and a medical kit that suddenly seemed to carry a lot more psychological weight than it had an hour ago. They found the first unconscious crew member 2 corridors away, Ensign Krextal, who had taken a stunning blast to the chest and was breathing very shallowly. "Vex, medical assessment?" Dr. Vexilla ran her scanners over the unconscious ensign. "Severe neural trauma, cardiac arrhythmia, and what appears to be early-stage organ shutdown. In other words, dying, but not quite dead yet." "Perfect timing, then." Marcus knelt beside the ensign and began his examination. The truth was, Krextal wasn't anywhere near death. The stunning blast had triggered a defensive coma state common to his species, but Marcus wasn't about to share that information with their increasingly nervous pirate observer. "This one's still in the early stages," Marcus announced loudly enough for Scarfang to hear. "Should be relatively straightforward to pull back from the brink." He administered a mild stimulant that would counteract the stunning effect, then stepped back. Vex, start the revival countdown. Revival countdown, she whispered. Work with me here, he whispered back, then raised his voice. Beginning human resurrection protocol in 3, 2, 1. Ensign Krextal's eyes opened, and he sat up groggily. What happened? The last thing I remember was a very bright light. You were dying, Marcus said matter-of-factly. But you're feeling better now. Dying? Krextal looked around, noticed Scarfang watching from the shadows, and immediately tried to reach for a weapon that wasn't there. Easy, Marcus said. Our visitor is here for educational purposes. He's learning about human medical capabilities. Scarfang made a sound that might have been a whimper. They repeated the performance with 3 more crew members, each time with Marcus providing running commentary about human resurrection techniques and the fundamental human refusal to accept death as anything more than a temporary inconvenience. Dr. Vexilla played her part perfectly, adding medical-sounding jargon that made the procedures sound appropriately mysterious and terrifying. By the 4th revival, Scarfang was muttering to himself in his native language, and Marcus was pretty sure he caught the words for dark magic and unnatural abomination several times. Captain, Marcus spoke into his communicator, I think we're making excellent progress on our diplomatic situation. How are the other pirates handling the news about human necromancy? Thylone's voice came back strained but hopeful. They've stopped shooting at us, if that's what you mean. Their communications chatter suggests they're having some kind of theological crisis. Excellent. Scarfang, would you like to report back to your crew about what you've observed here? The Kethmori leader nodded frantically and practically sprinted toward the nearest exit, leaving behind the distinctive scent of a predator who had suddenly realized he might be prey. 20 minutes later, Marcus was back in the medical bay, watching through the observation windows as the Kethmori raider fleet executed what could only be described as the most panicked retreat in the history of interstellar piracy. Their departure was so hasty that they left behind 3 boarding pods and what appeared to be a ceremonial weapon that Scarfang had dropped while running. Well, said Captain Thylone, who had arrived to personally witness the aftermath of what he was already calling the miracle of Medical Bay 7. I've received 17 separate surrender offers from other pirate factions in the last 10 minutes. Apparently word travels fast about humans who can reverse death. Zethkar was seated on the medical table, looking remarkably good for someone who had been clinically dead half an hour earlier. I still don't understand what happened. One moment I was unconscious, the next I was awake, and everyone was talking about resurrection. Simple, Marcus said, finally allowing himself to relax. You experienced what we call cardiac arrest due to electrical trauma. Your heart stopped, but your brain remained viable. The alien medical equipment interpreted the absence of a heartbeat as death, but human resuscitation techniques were able to restart your cardiovascular system before any permanent damage occurred. Dr. Vexilla looked up from her recalibration of the medical scanners. So there was no actual resurrection? No defying the laws of biology? Afraid not. Just good old-fashioned CPR, defibrillation, and the fact that Kethavari physiology is more resilient than your medical databases suggested. But the other crew members? Were unconscious, not dying. Their species have natural defensive responses to trauma that mimic death to outside observers. A mild stimulant was enough to wake them up. Captain Thylone was reviewing something on his datapad. Marcus, I'm looking at the communication intercepts from the Kethmori fleet. They're convinced that humans possess what they're calling death magic. The translation software is having trouble with some of the concepts, but I think they believe you can raise armies of undead warriors. That's ridiculous, Marcus said. I can barely keep the coffee machine working. Morse chimed in helpfully. I have updated my medical protocols to include a new classification, human death negotiation techniques. Shall I distribute this information to other medical AIs throughout the sector? Morse. That's either the worst idea you've ever had or the most brilliant, Marcus said. Let's go with brilliant. Lieutenant Commander Jorik appeared in the doorway, looking significantly less panicked than he had earlier. Marcus, we've got incoming transmissions from 17 different research institutions asking for details about human resurrection capabilities. Also, 3 different military organizations want to discuss recruitment opportunities. And added Navigator Prexelin, arriving behind Jorik. The Galactic Medical Council is demanding a full report on human medical techniques, specifically any procedures that might violate the fundamental laws of biology. Marcus looked around the medical bay at his perfectly ordinary human medical equipment, at the alien technology that had been so confident about death diagnoses, and at Zethkar, who was still very much alive despite having been officially deceased for the better part of an hour. "You know what?" he said finally. "Maybe we don't correct this misunderstanding right away." "Marcus," Captain Thylone said slowly, "are you suggesting we let the galaxy believe that humans can resurrect the dead?" "I'm suggesting that our reputation for being unkillable might be more useful than our reputation for being good at medical emergencies. Besides," he added, gesturing at the retreating pirate fleet, "when was the last time you saw pirates run away from a research vessel?" Dr. Vexilla was running diagnostics on her equipment, shaking her head with all 6 arms. "I'm going to have to rewrite our entire medical database. Apparently, dead and mostly dead are 2 very different things when humans are involved." "Vex, I tried to tell you that 15 minutes ago. I thought you were being metaphorical," Morse announced cheerfully. "Incoming priority transmission from Starfleet Medical Command. They're requesting immediate clarification on reports of human necromantic abilities and whether this represents a violation of the Galactic Convention on Supernatural Warfare." "Supernatural warfare?" Marcus repeated. "Morse, tell them that human medical techniques are entirely natural. We just have a very broad definition of what constitutes treatable conditions." Zethkar stood up and stretched, apparently working out the last of his post-death kinks. "Marcus, I owe you a debt of honor. You brought me back from the warrior's final journey." "Zeth, you were never on any journey. You were just taking a really inconvenient nap. Nevertheless, the clan will want to know of your abilities. This could change everything." Captain Thylone was still reading incoming transmissions, and his expression was shifting from relief to something that might have been mild terror. "Marcus, we're getting reports that 3 different pirate fleets have surrendered to patrol vessels just by mentioning they'd heard about human death magic. Also, the Interspecies Medical Exchange is offering us a research grant that's approximately 7 times our ship's total value. And," added Dr. Vexilla, "the Kethvari High Command is requesting a cultural exchange program specifically to study human resurrection techniques." Marcus looked around at his crewmates, then at his perfectly ordinary medical equipment, then at the vast expanse of space where word was already spreading about the humans who could mock death itself. "Well," he said finally, "I guess we're officially the ship with the magical Death Doctor now." His communicator chirped with an incoming emergency call. Marcus sighed and reached for his medical kit. "What now?" "Medical emergency on Deck 4, came the voice of Ensign Valkroon. "Crew member Dexlar has suffered what appears to be a fatal reaction to the food replicators." Marcus paused. "Fatal reaction?" "He's unconscious and showing no vital signs. The medical scanners are reading complete biological shutdown." Marcus looked at his crew, then at his medical kit, then at the growing legend that was apparently attached to his name whether he wanted it or not. "On my way," he said, shouldering his equipment. "And Ensign, don't let anyone move the body. Human resurrection techniques work best when the deceased hasn't been disturbed." As he left the medical bay, he could hear Captain Thylone talking to Dr. Vexilla. "Do you think he knows what he's doing?" "I have no idea," she replied. "But at this point, I'm not sure it matters. Half the galaxy already believes he can raise the dead, and the other half is too afraid to test the theory." Marcus smiled as he walked down the corridor toward his next impossible patient. Maybe being the universe's most feared necromancer wouldn't be so bad after all. At least now, when the emergency klaxon sounded like a dying space whale, he could be reasonably confident that whatever was having a bad day would think twice before making it his problem too. Behind him, Morse's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Attention, crew members. Please note that death is now considered a temporary inconvenience rather than a permanent condition. Human medical staff will attempt resurrection on all deceased personnel as scheduling permits. Please have your affairs in order, but don't consider them final." Marcus shook his head and kept walking. Just another day aboard the Cosmic Joke, where the only thing more unpredictable than alien technology was the universe's sense of humor.